like to turn down the music and we'll rock and roll. You can do it in your heels. I'll hand it to you. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for spending your Saturday evening here with us. And some of you, actually, I recognize from the 2 o'clock. Uh, yeah. Thanks for spending all of Saturday here with us. So, my name is Bruce Patton. I'm the curator here at Savoy. And welcome to everybody. I appreciate you being here. We got a great show. We've been with Tom all day today. We actually took him over to Old Car City. And so he had a great time there. We also got to take him to a couple of our other museums so he could see both Booth and Tellus. So we had just enough time to walk him very quickly through those other ones too today. So we got to see a couple of our other museums that we have here. So hopefully you guys had a chance to go and look at the other exhibits that we have besides the barn finds. We were really excited about the Harvest the Highway one with the tractors, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that one too, along with the Studebakers and the fabulous fiberglass that we have there. But if you look up here, you can kind of see what's coming next. So we have Small Block Muscle coming next, along with It's a Doozy. And we also have Roar of the Jaguar. And I mentioned earlier today that we're actually going to have the GSRA is going to be here. I think it's the second week of July. So the Georgia Street Rod Association, they're going to do a drive and a stop here on Saturday. And then in September, we're going to have the International Jaguar Festival is going to be here for the weekend. So so check that out. So it'll be a great time. Also, as you guys may or may not know, we do a movie in here once a month, so part of your membership. And the next one is going to be Corvette Summer. So that one will be coming here. I think it's the second weekend in July. So yeah, Friday the 11th. I'd like to thank Styles Auto Care. Again, couldn't do it without their support. These Tireside chats. So really appreciate their help and their support. And I think there's somebody from there whose birthday it is today. Just want to say happy birthday to them. Frankie. We won't say who it is, but anyway, thank you so much for your support. Now, this is why you're here. So, Tom Cotter. So we got to meet Tom. He's a great guy, definitely a car guy. Matter of fact, if you look at his business card, it says certified car geek. So he's born in New York City, raised on Long Island. He's been car crazy since his childhood, with the old Matchbox cars. For the past 4 decades, he's worked in nearly every aspect of the car world. So car parker, mechanic, new and used car sales, public relations, marketing executive, and you guys probably know him more as a journalist and an author. I think he's up to 17 books now. We actually had a book signing earlier today, so hopefully you guys got to experience that also. So without further ado, I'd like to bring in Tom.
Thank you. Thank you. So if I wasn't here, I'd want to be where you are, because all I am is you. I promise you that I'm just a blue-collar car guy who got a little bit lucky here and there. but I've never played golf. I don't fish, I don't hunt. This is all I do. So people say, you're like, wow, you have so much knowledge. I don't know anything else. Like, I don't know anything else. Some of you guys are doctors and lawyers. I couldn't do it. I can only do one thing. So when I was about 12 years old, I lived on Long Island, and I was with some friends walking down a dirt road near my elementary school, and I found it was a Model A Roadster or a 32 Ford Roadster or something, but wow, something clicked. I wasn't even 12. I was probably 8. Wow, I could take that home and make a hot rod out of it. And so I could put snow tires in the back and bicycle wheels in the front and make it look like I see the cars in Hot Rod magazine. And I asked my friend Ricky Anderson, would you help me drag it home? He said, I'm not going to help you drag it home. So I could have been Chip Foose if he had helped me drag that home. But he didn't, so it took a little bit longer. But it was finding cars. I didn't have any money, and it was finding cars that was the most appealing thing to me, because you didn't have to pay retail price if you found a car in somebody's yard, and you could negotiate a deal that was probably less expensive than if you bought it at an auction or whatever. And so I made a habit of looking over my shoulder whenever I drove down the road at the garages and the barns I was passing. My wife would you look where you're going? And so it was 2000, I sold a business, and the time was right for me to own a car that I always wanted to own. It was a Cobra, a 289 Cobra. And I bought it in California, and my friend Peter Egan from Road and Track magazine and I drove it across the United States from Walnut Creek, California, near San Francisco, to Davidson, North Carolina. Over 9 days. We had no rush, 2-lane roads, and never went on a highway. And when that story came out in Road and Track magazine, it was January issue 2002, I got a call from a guy. It was a great story, by the way. So if you can remember this, Google cross-country Cobra, and you can read that story. Right now, it's 23 years old. It's an amazing story that Peter wrote. And so soon after that issue came out, I get a call from a guy. Hello, Tom, this is you, Barger. I'm your neighbor. Oh, yeah, Barger. Barger, I've seen that sign, Barger Farm. So we shared a property line. My property came down to a fence line, and his property went from there. His house was about a half mile from mine, and I was always intrigued because there was a barn that I passed virtually every day when I went to my office. What could be in that barn? What could be in that barn? And I've been in enough barns to know that most of the time it's a pile of hay. Secondly, it's a tractor or a truck. It's very seldom was there an interesting car in that barn because farmers had other priorities. And he said, Tom, this is you, Barger. I just read Road and Track magazine. I love Cobras. I would love to see your car, and I want to show you what I have in my barn. Wow. Wow. So I'd never met this man. So that Saturday, my son and I went over there, knocked on the door, and Hugh Barger came, and he looked at my Cobra. He said, I've always wanted to own a Cobra. I just never pulled the trigger on it. But let me show you what I have in my barn. And that's how my second barn find career started. So let me begin with the barn finding life. Barn finding to me, and these cars that I find on my YouTube channel, I hope you've watched Barn Find Hunter. That's steel. This is aluminum. But that's just hardware. I love cars, but it's just hardware. It's nuts and bolts and pieces of metal. To me, it's the human interest story that's the most intriguing part about a car. So, I can't do a show about a car. If you were at the first presentation I did at 2 o'clock, it's about the people that owned this car and the people that were involved in racing these cars and building these cars. To me, that's the most important aspect of an old car. All the books I've written are really human interest stories. And to me, it's the biggest compliment when a husband buys the book, because he's a car enthusiast, The Cobra in the Barn or whatever book, and I see his wife 6 months later, she said, I read your book and I really enjoyed it. When I can write a book and appeal to a non-car enthusiast or do YouTube series on my show and appeal to people who don't care about cars. That's what I love the most. So these are some of the most interesting human interest stories that I've found during my program with Haggerty's Barn Find Hunter. So I travel around the country, and actually we've been to England, so now I guess I travel around the world looking for old cars and finding stories. Very seldom do I buy these cars. Sometimes I do, but I don't need any more cars. I have enough cars, I've owned enough cars that I don't need to have any more cars except sometimes. So, so this is Jordan Lewis, and he's my, I'm pointing to the screen over there. That's Jordan Lewis, and he's my main cameraman and producer. He lives in Traverse City, Michigan, and he and John Rudolph travel around the country with me. 2 days ago, we were in Cullman, Alabama, filming a collection of cars that a gentleman had in buildings, 1,300 cars he's been collecting over the last 25 years. 1,300 cars. And they're all going for auction this October, no reserve. So just FYI, it's going to be interesting. So they travel around, I find about these cars, and we just go and film it. Some cars have stories, and some cars don't. This car is an interesting car. It's a 1954 Corvette. The second year of the Corvette, 6-cylinder engine. Interesting car, but no story. I met the guy that owned this car. This car is in Georgia. This car is 100 yards from I-85 as soon as you cross the South Carolina-Georgia line. If you look quickly to the left, you can see some cars in the woods. Well, this car is about 100 feet beyond those cars, and it's in a lean-to. And I asked the owner, what's the story with this car? I traded a pickup truck for it and whatever, and it's been here for 25. And there clearly was no human interest story. So here's the case where an interesting car should have an interesting story, and it might be, but there was no way for me to find it out. So that was kind of, too bad. But this is my neighbor Hugh Barger's car. Now, when I went in the barn that I've been passing for 20 years, he said, I want to show you what's in my barn. You have an AC Cobra. I have an AC Greyhound. What? AC was a car company in Europe, and they built, Carroll Shelby bought AC cars and put Ford motors in and made Cobras, but they had AC Aces, AC Bristols, AC Greyhounds, AC Asicas. AC was a car company on its own. So this had a 6-cylinder Bristol motor. It was an AC Bristol. And it's an aluminum body. But the most fascinating thing about it is my next door neighbor had a car that came off the same obscure assembly line as my Cobra. He said, I loved reading your story. I've always wanted a Cobra. Let me show you what I have in my garage. And this is what he had. So his father bought him this car when he went to graduate school. He went to Davidson College for his undergraduate, and then he went up to, got his degree in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure which school. But this car was his transportation until the master cylinder, the master brake cylinder, failed. They made so few of these cars. I think they made 57 of these cars. There was no spare parts. So when that part failed and there was no spare parts, he parked it in the barn. It sat there for 50 years. So you can see pigeon droppings, raccoon prints. It had sunk down to the chassis. And he said, I'd love to fix it up one day. So I had written a book. I had written one book at that point, and it was called The Holman and Moody Story, about a famous race team in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was looking for another book to write, but I had to feel confident that I knew the subject. And so I was talking to my publisher that afternoon about something else. And I said, Lee, you'll never guess what happened. I said, my next door neighbor called me, and he liked the road and track story, invited me to his house, and he had an AC not too far from my AC. Like, that's crazy. There's not too many ACs in the world. He said, Tom, that should be your next book. I said, what do you mean? He said, we'll call it The Cobra in the Barn, and it'll be about finding old cars. I said, I don't know anybody's going to be interested in reading that. That's my private passion, but I don't think anybody else. He said, if you take a chance on writing it, I'll take a chance on publishing it. And bada bing, bada boom, Cobra in the Barn, you know, it sold, for a car book, it sold a lot of copies, like 100,000 copies. Like, wow. And from that stemmed a lot of other car books. And ultimately, McKeel Haggerty called me up and said, Tom, I really like your books. I think they would do well in a video format. Would you give it a try? And that was 10 years ago. And, you know, here's Barn Find Hunter. We just exceeded the number of episodes of Seinfeld. It was 180 Seinfeld episodes, and I think I'm at like 184 now with Barn Finder. Take that, Jerry. So, so just interestingly, so you got this car as a college student. His father bought it for him because he liked sports cars. This car has since been restored. His son and daughter-in-law said, you know what, we need to restore this car. And so they sent it to a restorer in Virginia, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. The original color for this car was silver with red interior, and it's back to silver with red interior, and it is fabulous. They have $330,000 invested in it, that's the problem, because this car doesn't have a value of $330,000. To them, they had the money. It meant a lot to their father, and so it's restored. It's not driven, but you know, so there's a happy ending to that story. This is one of my favorite stories. I got a call. Haggerty said, look, there's a guy who's got an old Porsche well, he doesn't have, his mother's got an old Porsche near Dallas, Texas, and she needs to get rid of it, and would you be interested in going down and filming an episode there? I think so. So he told me a little bit about what was going on. So I flew down to Dallas with my 2 camera guys, and I met Maria. And Maria was an amazing woman. She was born and raised in Mexico City. And as a young lady, probably in her late teens, early 20s, she was on a tour bus touring something in Mexico, and she sat next to an American from Texas. And they toured together and became friendly on that tour, and then became pen pals, and then fell in love. Maybe he came down to Mexico once, she went up to Texas once, and he proposed to her. And he said, you know, I have a Porsche, and it's white, but I know your favorite color is orange because you told me that on the bus. And he sent a note, like a love letter, with an orange pen. He said, when you marry me, I'm going to pick you up for our wedding in a Porsche that's the same color as this pen. And he painted his white Porsche orange. And he went down to Mexico City and picked her up, and they got married, and she moved to Dallas. And you know, they were a young couple enjoying a sports car. They did rallies. They toured the Texas Hill Country. They did what people did with sports cars back in the 60s. They had a child who's the man that contacted me initially. And he said, you know, my mother needs to sell this car. She's going to lose the house. My father's deceased. So I went down with my camera crew. I sat in her living room, and what a heavy moment that was. She showed me, see this orange pen? This is the pen that my husband sent me. This is before I ever saw the car. Here's my wedding gown. Here's the photographs of my wedding. I mean, like, this was such a big occasion in her life that this car was stored in her garage, and if you look at the blankets and tablecloths down here, they covered the car, and it had been covered for decades, but it still was a shiny car underneath. And her husband died of ALS. So he was not able to drive this car for, 10 years before he actually passed away. And since he passed away, she's kind of kept that as a monument to remember him. Kept it clean, covered, and see, it's a flat tire, but it had not been out of the garage in 20 years. So he passed ALS, and she had no career, no job, because he was an engineer. He made a good living. And so her son said, look, she needs to sell this car. I can't afford to pay her house, but she's going to lose the house. So I found out that RM Auctions in Hershey, they have an auction every year during Hershey, and they specialize in preserved cars. And if you've ever been to Hershey, you've seen those cars. They're never restored, and that's what that auction is known for. So we had this car shipped up to Hershey, and we're sitting in the audience for the auction, and you know, she's sitting right next to me. I'm sitting here, she's sitting here, and her son's sitting here. And we're watching Pierce Arrows and Bentleys and whatever. And then, you know, this car had got so much publicity, this barn find Porsche Speedster, that people started to come in. They knew the Speedster was lining up on the ramp to come up to be on the stage and be bid on. And so, do I hear 125,000, 150,000, 175, 200,000, 225,000? And she's like grabbing me, like she's like, whoop, 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 don't look at that. Let me put that down over there. And she was grabbing me like this is the most exciting moment in her life. 200,000, 225, 275. Can I hear 300,000? It sold for $325,000. Her life, the rest of her life was covered. And here's a room full of, you know, hard guy auction guys. You know, like, you know, how much does it cost? You know, like, and they stood up and gave her a round of applause. All these people, and she was crying on my shoulder, and she's looking up at the ceiling saying, he's still looking out for me. And it's like, oh my God. You know, like you couldn't write that into a movie or something. It was just amazing. And so she was able to pay off her mortgage, and you know, I haven't been in touch with her for years, but if she's still alive, I hope she's doing well. So that's, you know, kind of a pretty emotional one. This is not so emotional. This is so I was doing Barn Find Hunter episodes. No, I'm sorry. I was doing a book called Motor City Barn Finds. And the idea was to drive around with my photographer for 2 weeks around Detroit, finding cars in the Motor City. And we found all sorts of amazing cars. And people said, oh, watch out, you go in the wrong neighborhood, you're gonna get mugged. You know what? It was just wonderful. I drove this Woody wagon into the wrong neighborhoods, and everybody loved it. I drive a 39 Ford Woody when I go on these hunts, and it was just an amazing time. So I heard this guy out near Ann Arbor in Northville, Michigan, who collected R-code Fords. R-code is a 427 or 428 Ford Galaxy. And he had recently gotten a job transfer to Manhattan. Well, you know, you really can't have big Fords in Manhattan. So he was selling off his collection. And so I had heard about him, and he was keeping his cars temporarily stored in a mini storage building like that. That's right where it was. He had, you know, an R-code Galaxy coupe, 427 side oiler coupe, I mean not a coupe, but a two-door, a four-door, a station wagon, and another two-door, and a wagon. And so he lived in Manhattan, but he said, look, if you want to film my wagon, I have my friend who lives near there. He'll come and he's got the key and he'll open it up. So we drove it out of one of these storage units. And that is the only Ford Galaxy wagon, Country Squire, built with a 428 cubic inch, 4-speed manual transmission, bucket seats, and a console ever made. Like, how did that happen? Well, I did some investigating, and how it happened was this is 67. In 1966, late in the year, there was a young married guy in Ohio, and he had 3 kids. All his friends are buying Roadrunners and GTOs and Chevelle big blocks, SSs and stuff. And he had a family, so he wanted a muscle car. So he goes to the Ford dealership, and he said, look, my wife is going to kill me if I buy a muscle car. But can I buy a station wagon built like a muscle car? And so like I was a Ford salesman for a little while, and this is before the computers, and you had these little boxes, and you could check, okay, you could have a 390 in a station wagon, but it had to come with an automatic, or you could have a 289 with a 3-speed on the column. And I'm sorry, sir, you can't build a 428 with a 4-speed. Now, I worked at a Ford dealership, and I know how desperate salespeople and dealerships can be at the end of the year. It's December of 1966, and it's like a week before Christmas. And he said, well, okay, I guess I can't buy the car I want. I'll just wait until next year. Well, every little dealerships, no matter where they are, you know, Oregon or New York or Michigan and Ohio, they want to sell the last car, the one more car. And so they run this guy's request to the district office, regional office, and up to headquarters. And it winds up on this young executive's desk. And like, okay, I know they're desperate to make a sale, but okay, this guy wants a 428 4-speed wagon? What? And he shows it to his boss. And his boss, hell yeah, we'll build that. And that boss is Lee Iacocca. And he said, so they built one of one. So he got his muscle car that he was able to take his family on picnics and camping trips. And so this guy wound up with that car, and I was able to drive it around this parking lot. And then, my film crew came because I did a book. And like 6 days later, my film crew was there, so we did Barn Find Hunter. So I drove it around this little mini, and I called my wife and said, you know what? I love Fords, and I love wagons, and I love barn finds. I think I need to buy this car. And so actually I owned this car for a little bit. And I'd say I owned it for 5 years. And, it was a cool car. It got no gas mileage, like 8 miles a gallon, And you couldn't do any burnouts with it because it had like a 310 rear end or something. So you'd burn out the clutch. But it made great noise, exhaust noise, dual exhaust, And so I did a lot of mechanical work to it. And then I'm on the board for McPherson College out in Kansas. If you've never heard of McPherson, there's a 4-year degree in automotive restoration. It's an amazing place. So every year I drive a different car out to McPherson to the board meetings. And so one year I strapped a surfboard on the roof and drove from North Carolina to Kansas. And like I'm at a gas station, and the guy, is that a surfboard? I said, I heard the waves are killer out here. Where are, oh well. So you had to be really confident to drive a car like this because when you pulled into a gas station, half the people thought you were the coolest dude, and the other half said, don't look at that man, he's homeless. So anyway, it was a blast to own. During COVID, I sold several cars, and this is one of the ones I sold, and I can't say I regret it because I sold it to a guy that loves it so much. He's in New Jersey. He said, if you ever want to borrow this car for episodes or whatever, you can borrow it again. And he took care of all the little things that I never got around to doing, like the electric rear window and the tailgate. And that had the dual tailgate. It opened this way, and it opened this way, and the hinge was broken. He got a new hinge. So all the little things that needed to be taken care of, he took care of. So it went to a good home, and I see it now and then. In fact, I invited him to be a part of this Barn Find display. You saw upstairs the Shelby and the Packard, whatever. He said, you know what? I don't want to be without my car for 5 months. So he said, I really thank you, but no, I don't want to do that. So this was interesting. When we do Barn Find Hunter, it's how do we choose the next location? It's almost like throwing a dart against a map. So we're in San Diego eating this wonderful seafood dinner. We had just filmed all sorts of cool cars in Southern California, cars in people's backyards and whatever. And so these 20-somethings people in front of me, cameramen, producers, they said, where do you want to go next? And I said, I want to go to Midland, Texas. And they all take out their phone. Why do you want to go there? Western Texas. Why would you want to go there? It's a desert. Bingo. Why would Midland, Texas be an interesting place for a car guy? Chaparral. There was a gentleman named Jim Hall who was from a wealthy oil family who raced sports cars and ultimately built cars called Chaparrals. They were K&M cars. They were the most aerodynamic, most ground-effective, amazing cars of their era. They were so far ahead of everybody else as far as, aerodynamics and stuff. And why Midland, Texas? Why? So I've always wanted to go there. So we went there, Midland Odessa Airport, and it's a gritty place. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's gritty. It's all oil wells and fracking and all this stuff going on. And big, heavy trucks made big dimples in the road. There's no passenger cars. Everybody has a truck. There's potholes. to stay in a Hampton Inn, now this is 8 years ago, to stay in a Hampton Inn was $450 a night, which, was more than the Waldorf Astoria in Manhattan. If you wanted to work at McDonald's, this is at the time, $20 an hour, this is 8 years ago, $20 an hour. If you didn't have a place to live, they would pay for your hotel. If you didn't have a way to work, they'd pick you up and drop you off. Because nobody goes to Midland to work at McDonald's. They go to become billionaires. And I have a friend who in Houston, John Meekum, who used to be own race teams. He said, Tom, Midland is a town where you can go to as a pauper, make $1 billion, lose it, and have a good chance to make it back again, being a wildcatter on the oil fields. So that's why I wanted to go there. And so it was an interesting place, but gritty and dirty and dusty and windy. And, if you smiled, you got dirt in your teeth and you crunched. So we went riding around. I went to the Petroleum Museum and saw the whole Chaparral collection, and went to Chaparral's race shop, and there was an old racetrack there called Rattlesnake Raceway. It was a private racetrack, and he let me drive my Woody around the track. Pretty cool. But then we're here to film. So I met a guy named Tom Cross, and that's him right there. And he had a business, but then behind the business, he had all these cars. So he had a pool business. Everybody's a billionaire in Midland, so everybody's got a pool. And he's the guy that builds all the pools. And then he collected old Fords in the back. They're just in the back. And so he had probably 50 or 60 old cars, and I'm walking through with my camera guys. Okay, well, there's an old Rambler station wagon, and here's a Datsun 240Z, and here's, a Falcon convertible, and there's this 62 Ford station wagon. Wow. Okay, well, then over here is a 57 Ford panel van and a 63 Chevy, and there's that 62 Ford wagon. I couldn't get away from this car. So a lot of you folks are as old around as I am. There used to be a Simonites commercial on TV, and somebody went into a car in a junkyard. It was all dusty like this, and they waxed it, and it shined. So I said, hey, Tom, do you have some compound and a rag? He said, yeah, I'll come out. So this car was sitting out in the field back there somewhere, not where it is now. And I shined up a little spot that big. Now, this car has never been painted. It's factory paint. It's been sitting in the desert for more than a half a century. And I polished up a piece like that, and it shined like $1 million. I said, Tom, do you have a buffer? Yeah, but I don't have an extension cord that long. And then I hear, boom, and he fires up his forklift and picks up this car from way out there and brings it next to his shop, and suddenly we can reach it with the extension cord. And I start buffing out this front fender. Oh, my God, this car doesn't want to die. And he said, I have a chance to sell the property. I need to get rid of all these cars. He said, if you want to buy this thing, I'll let it go really cheap. So I talked to my Haggerty guys, and we called headquarters in Michigan. I said, I really want to buy this car. There's something about this car that's talking to me. And so I said, we should buy this car, fix it up, and donate it to some good cause. And so over the course of a year, Tom and his friends worked on the car. They put a 390 engine, they put a rebuilt transmission in, dual exhaust with glass packs, and, I would go there occasionally, and college students from McPherson College would come in and work on it. And we'd have these work weeks on this car over the course of a year. And a year later, I flew in, and that's the car. Look now, so you can see rust on the quarter panel, but look at that shine. Holy mackerel, I polished that car up. That's original paint. And so Dynamat, gave us floor matting, and all these companies. There was a company that gave us disc brake setup for the front, and mufflers, and all these companies donated things. And Tom Cross and his friends donated all the time. And so we drove this car about 1,000 miles from Midland, Texas, to McPherson College, and we donated it to the school as a parts chaser. So like the school accepted it, it went to a good cause, and this is the car they used to go to junkyards or parts stores to buy parts for the cars they were storing. So, that was a happy ending, and they still have it. And when we did the car in Tom's garage, we just upholstered the seats with Indian blankets. But now college students are making it their senior project. That interior is like concourse now. Factory, beautiful seat covers, door panels, headliner. So every year this car is getting better and better. So But yeah, again, my passion for Ford station wagons. What kind of car is that? Yep, yep. Well, it's either a Daytona or a Superbird, and I don't remember which one. But if you've watched Barn Find Hunter for a while, there was one episode I did of a man's collection in Pittsburgh, North Carolina, and I could never identify where it was. He made me promise I wouldn't say anything. But I had heard about this guy from a friend in the Shelby Club. He said, look, he doesn't let anybody on his property, but I think I can get you on there, but you can never say his name and never say where it is. So I had to go and be introduced to him first. I had to go there, without my camera guys, and just meet him and kind of ask me questions. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, church guy, so he had to go through this whole thing and give me magazines and stuff. That was kind of the initiation, but I passed. And he says, okay, you can come back here with your film guys. So about a month later, we came back. And this guy was such an interesting character. He said, I'm sitting on a fortune of cars. I know that. But I didn't buy these cars to make any money on them. I bought these cars. He had like 100 cars in buildings like this. He'd fill up a building, then build another building, and fill it up and build another building. And he had a big piece of property down a dirt road, so most people would never know he's there. I bought them mostly during the fuel crisis, when nobody wanted a big block anything. They didn't want a Hemi. They didn't want a Cobra Jet. They didn't want a 454 or anything. They just wanted to remember, I had a Pinto that I had to push up to the gas pumps. Remember those days? And so that's when he had enough money to buy these cars. And he would buy them, he'd reupholster them, paint them, go through them mechanically, put on new tires, put it in a barn. Next, next, next. So his passion was, he had about 6 of these wing cars. One was a Hemi-powered. His passion was Jaguars. He had E-types, XK120s, 140s. His passion was Lincoln Zephyrs, like the beautiful coupe we saw just off the lobby up there, V12s. And then everything else. Dan Gurney edition, Mercuries. He had a brand new Corvette, 1984 Corvette, but the dealership, I think, was 9 miles from his house, and this car had 11 miles on it. So he drove it, picked up at the dealership, drove it back there, never drove it again. Still had plastic on the seat covers, plastic on the floor, the door panels. Corvettes, a Pantera. Just imagine 100 cars that every single one of them is desirable. There was nothing there that was mundane. Nothing, everything was cool. And, this guy, he was probably 80, and his father, which was still alive, he was like 100. And his wife was so cool. I'm a salesman, and I just happened to find out. I said, can I come up with my camera guys on that Thursday? He said, well, it's my wife's birthday, but I guess you can come. So I brought her flowers, so you got to do it, So suddenly she loved me. And so he had 2 daughters who cared nothing about cars. Do you sell these cars? No. What do you do with them? I just have them. I love them. I work on them now and then. And he had a couple of 59 Cadillacs, a 59 Eldorado red convertible with 2 4-barrels and bucket seats. I didn't know Cadillacs ever came with bucket seats. Rare, red interior, red exterior, fabulous cars. And so I said, well, what are you going to do with these cars? He said, I don't know. And, so often in my life, in this new life I have, of finding, I come across people, and I want to ask them, okay, one day you're not going to be alive. Right now, you can pick a new owner for that car, but someday you're not going to be able to pick that new owner. Like, what's going to happen? But I can't do that. I have to be respectful. They're his cars. He can do what he wants with them. But, this Barn Find Hunter episode was the highest viewed episode we ever did. It was a 2-part series. It was over the course of a couple of weeks. And it was amazing. And he doesn't live terribly far from me. I'd really like to find out, what's happening with the cars, what's happening with him. I guess I should reach out, but in some ways I'm kind of afraid to do that. So it's just one of the dilemmas if you're a barn find hunter. This is a good one. So this, Bill Warner is? Bill Warner, the Amelia Island Concourse founder. So Bill tells me about there's a Woodall wildfire. He knows what it is. That was a kit car, fiberglass kit car that made its appearance in a movie called Johnny Dark. And I'm sure that Jeff Hacker, who owns one of the cars out on the barn find field here, he collects fiberglass cars. I'm sure he's got one. So he told me about this guy in the purple sweatshirt, and he said, he's got a wood-all wire fire in his driveway. I said, really? So I found my way there. It's in Columbia, South Carolina, just outside of Columbia. And I find my way, and he had a lot of other cars. There's a 912 Porsche, and there's a 30 CS BMW, and everything's sitting around, with grass growing all over them and stuff. So I was able to do an episode all around there with those cars. And he says, okay, I got 2 more cars I want to show you about. And one, he said, it's in my building right over there. He had a metal building, maybe it was 40 by 60. And so he said, you have to leave your cameras out here. Okay, and we had to leave our cell phones out here. No photos. So we open the door and we walk in, and it's a cluttered building with, there's a 55 Chevy and a drill press and a Bridgeport machine and, a stack of a dishwasher. And, so you had to kind of walk through this way and walk through this way. He said, go to the back corner. Now, he was too big to make it in the back corner, so he couldn't go back there. But go to the back corner, and there's a car covered up, and don't lift the cover until I tell you. So it's a woman from Haggerty who's a producer, 2 camera guys and me. We work our way back there, back to the back corner, and there's a cover over a car. He said, okay, lift it up. And lift it up, and it's a candy apple red 300 SL Goldwing Mercedes in the back corner. That's a real car. Now, it's amongst washing machines and, drill presses and things. What's the story? He said, well, my father bought that from Downing Motors in Atlanta in 1963. Jim Downing is a race driver I know. He's a Mazda racer. His father owned Downing Motors, which I guess they did repairs on the bottom floor, but he had a couple of levels of used cars and elevators. And so his father had some extra money. I think it was about $5,000, and he bought this in the early 60s. And it was candy apple red, like a George Barris paint job or something. And they drove it around for a while, and it's parked back there. And he said, I promised my father I would never show anybody that car, so that's why I didn't want you to bring cameras back there. Someday I'll call you, and you can come back with your cameras. I said, wow. So we were getting ready to leave. He said, I have one more car. He said, I bought a piece of property a few miles from here years ago, and there's no barn on that property, and there's an old Cadillac in that barn. So he said, come on over. So we follow him over there, park in the road, and then we had to walk through the woods. I'm afraid of ticks like crazy. So I get back there, and there's this old Cadillac. So what do you do? What do you guys do when you see an old car? You look inside it. Well, I looked inside the window, and it was loaded with buzzards, and they flew out. They flew out of every direction. So it was a buzzard house. Right? So I said, oh, man, that was interesting. So I don't know if you guys can see this down here. But these are all bones. These are skeletons. These are like mice skeletons and squirrel skeletons. And so that's what the buzzards had dragged in, and that was the remnants, the rib cages and stuff from those things. So anyway, we're looking at the car. Okay, I've seen buzzards. I see skeletons. This is a great stop. So what kind of motor does it have? It's a 47 Caddy or a 46 Caddy or something. I said, is it a flathead or an overhead valve? He said, I never opened the hood. I just bought this property and the car was here. Let's open the hood. So he opens the hood. Now that hood is huge. It's huge. It's the biggest from me to you, right? So he lifts it. He takes this big hood ornament. See the hood ornament on top? He pushes it up and lifts his hood, and all this leaves come tumbling down. And then this guy, that's his house, right? And so, you ever see like a possum with big fangs? They have fangs. And he looks at me like, well, that's my leg. And I'm screaming like a little girl. I'm running away. My camera guys are laughing their ends off. Anyway. So, it was a surprise all around. I'm sure we ruined his day. Hopefully he was able to rebuild his home after it all fell on the ground. But So this was a real interesting stop. We're always trying to add states to Barn Find Hunter, and I think at this point we're like at 32 states. You know, we've done episodes in Alaska even. We did some episodes in Europe, but we're trying to get to all 50 states. You know, someday we'll get there. And so we'd never been to Utah. So this is St. George, Utah. We flew into there, knew nothing about. So when American Pickers picks a city, we're gonna pick Charlotte, North Carolina, to do American Pickers. Well, I got to tell you, it's phony. Like they'll send out a big email post or on Facebook or something. Show us what you got. And so you send pictures, and they negotiate. And it's all show business. It's not real. Like they negotiate the prices before those guys ever get there. So anyway, I don't want to do that. I just want to land in a city, and my Woody was there, the Woody I had shipped out. And I just want to find cars the old-fashioned way. I want to do this, and this, and this, and looking behind my shoulder and ask that guy at a gas station who's an old car guy in town, because that's what I've always done, and I'm comfortable with it. So we were there for like a day, and I couldn't find any cars. And another half day, and then I found a Volkswagen Squareback. Like, you know, it's any port in a storm. Like, okay, there's a Squareback Volkswagen in this guy's yard. We'll start with him. And so we talked to him for a while, and then I said, okay, you know anybody else? Oh yeah, there's a guy, you know, over here, and he's got a couple of this. And we found a hot rod shop. And everybody that we went to, and it turned out to be a pretty good episode, everybody we went to said, too bad you can't get into Reds. And so after about 3 days of hearing about Reds, I said, what the heck's Reds? And so, well, it's an old junkyard on the north side of town, and it closed, 30 years ago, and he doesn't let anybody in there. He's just a crabby old guy. Oh, really? So after hearing that, so I'm in town for 5 days. On like the 3.5 days into it, I got to find Reds. So we, find out where Reds is, and it's a 20-acre junkyard, and it's got 6 foot or 7 foot tall concrete walls all around it, cinder block. And so you can't see inside there. But I pulled the Woody up to the fence, and then I, stood on the running board and looked inside there. I was like, wow, we need to get in there. And that's what it looked like. And so I see a tow truck inside Reds, and it said Reds and a phone number. So, and it didn't have a message. There was no voice. It just went beep. So I don't know if it was like a real phone call or not, but I said, hi, my name is Tom Cotter, and I'm driving around town in a 39 Ford Woody wagon looking for old cars. I don't want to buy them. I just want to look at them, and I've heard that Reds is a pretty good place to see old cars. If you'd call me back, here's my number. Thank you. And 10 o'clock that night in my hotel room, this is Red. I saw your Woody wagon driving through town. And there's a message there, too. Driving an old car means you're an old car person. If you drive a new SUV, you're a poser. So he said, I saw your Woody wagon driving through town. I'll meet you at my yard at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I had been meeting with old car guys and hot rodders and all this stuff in St. George, Utah for days, and nobody had ever gotten in there. And I just got in there. And so he was waiting for us at 10 o'clock. He opened the gate. The Woody pulled in, closed the gate. He said, so you can do anything you want here. You have full reign to the whole place. But one promise you have to make, you can't take any pictures of me. I don't want to be interviewed, nothing. That's just not what I do. But my friend Jimmy here will answer all the questions. So Jimmy was a really neat guy, and he let us walk all over. And there was cool cars in here. There were GTOs, Chevelles. There were cars definitely that enthusiasts would love to have. Because you're in the desert, the metal was great. It might have had surface rust. So I thought this was a real artistic picture here with this Lincoln on top of the dumpster. There was something very juxtaposed about it. There was some kind of social message there somehow. The biggest car of its day wouldn't fit in a dumpster. So we spent the whole day there, and Red was such a nice guy. Such a nice guy. And everybody around town said he was a crabby guy, whatever. And so at the end of the day, I said, well, thanks. We're going home. We're flying home tomorrow, but this was the highlight of our trip. I have to thank you, and he really enjoyed us. And Jimmy, I thanked Jimmy. And And we left, and we flew home. And about 10 days later, Jimmy called me. He said, Red died. Really? He said his daughter, he wasn't answering the phone. His daughter went over to the house, and your business card was on the kitchen counter, and he was on the floor. He never had a chance to tell you how much he enjoyed being with you guys. And he's sorry that he didn't allow you to take any videos of him because he knew you weren't going to be exploitive, but it was too late. And so I just, it meant so much to him that you guys came and respected his wishes. He just wished that he had allowed himself to be included. Oh, I said, Jimmy, I'm sorry. Okay, well, thanks so much. I'll tell my camera guys. So I call up my camera guys at Haggerty, and I said, you know what? Red died. Red died. He was such a nice guy. We just made it because I said, the thing he regrets the most is that he didn't have any pictures of us. He didn't allow us to take any pictures of him. He says, let me check. And he called me back. This is Jordan Lewis. And he said, you know what? When he wasn't looking, I had my camera on my lap, and I shot a picture of him. And this is a weathered old junkyard man who worked hard his whole life. Look at his skin. I mean, that skin could write a book. And I called back Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, we have a picture. And Jimmy called Red's daughter, who found him dead on the floor, and she called me back hysterical. Because Jimmy said, oh my God, so she included this photo on the funeral card as the photo of him because it was the authentic guy. He wasn't dressed in a suit. He was dressed like he was every day. And it was in the newspaper obituary, used this photo. She said, let me tell you about my dad. He lost my mom about 3 years ago, and since then he's kind of been lost. But he started off in a little body shop, and then he added a tow truck to it, and then the towing business got big, and then he bought the junkyard. He started with nothing, and she said, my father has a lot of money, but you would never know it by the house he lived in, the cars he drove. He was just a humble guy, and so I look at that picture and like, oh man, I miss that guy. We probably spent 8 hours with him, yet he turned into a friend, and I'm sorry he's gone, but you can see how finding cars and human interest stories they mesh together. So, a great guy. This is one of the most highly viewed Barn Find Hunter episodes we've ever had, and it just happened to have been in Charlotte, North Carolina, near where I live. I got a call from a guy who said, my friend is not in a healthy state of mind. I think he had probably a breakdown or something. But he had a lot of money. He was born into a wealthy family. He was a sports car guy. So he bought, that was the car he drove to college, a TR6. That car had only 6,000 miles on it. This is a Morgan. It was a V8 Morgan with a propane engine. That was the time where you had to bring in cars to meet emission standards. They couldn't be gas-powered. A 275 GTB, long-nose, alloy body Ferrari, and a 427 Cobra. And he said, my friend lives in an apartment. He has 2 houses in the right neighborhood. So if you're in Charlotte, the right neighborhood is called Myers Park. That's where the doctors live, the lawyers live, the president of Bank of America lives. That's the neighborhood. And this house was so overgrown with trees that it had, the lawn turned into a forest, and you couldn't even see the house back there. Eventually, I guess over 40 years, a lawn turns into a forest. An acorn falls and a tree grows. And so this house, he had been fixing up with his fiance, and in the right neighborhood, the neighborhood he grew up in, and they were fixing it up, and halfway through this fixer-up thing, before they got married, she left him. And that just turned his life, that was it. It was 1982. And really, he didn't do anything with his life after that. He just died this past September. But his friend said, look, there's valuable cars in the garage. The city has condemned the property. They're going to tear the house and the garage down. Can you help me move these cars? So I'll check it out. And I went there like, oh my goodness, look at that. And so he was hoping, he was not in a good state of mind, and he thought he was broke. And he was hoping to get what he bought those cars for 40 years earlier. So he paid $42,000 for the Cobra, $47,000 for the Ferrari, and whatever he paid for these two. He was hoping to get that much money that, you know, it would allow him to live a little bit longer in his apartment and buy food and whatever. And so I said, look, will you trust me to take these cars and do something with them, and I'll, you know, I don't want a nickel out of it. I'll do the right thing. So we brought these cars to Amelia Island. Got a lot of publicity for them. Got the Barn Find Cobra and the Barn Find Ferrari. And we brought them to Amelia Island, and they kept them like dusty like that. But, you know, what they did thankfully clean out was all the mouse urine and mouse condominium in the trunk of the Cobra. And you open the glove box, and mice were running out of it. It was like a horror show. And so we cleaned all the mouse stuff out of there, and Gooding Auction Company, we had RM come. Hello. We had RM come. We had Gooding come. Bonhams come. I think 4 auction companies, and they said, we'll pay for the shipping, we'll pay to get them running again, whatever. Anyway, the family decided that Gooding would be the auction company in Amelia. So they still looked like that cosmetically, but they got them running. And so his friend brought the guy that owned these cars to the auction. And he was not in really good shape, you know. He had to be supported, and he was not an old man. And the Cobra sold for $950,000 plus commissions and stuff, so it was $1 million sale. And the Ferrari sold for $2.5 million plus commissions and stuff. So, you know, that was a $3.5 million deal. So it allowed him to live comfortably for the next 8 years until he died this past September. Interestingly, Peter Clute, I don't know if that name rings a bell, but he owns Legendary Motor Cars up in Ontario. He bought that Cobra, and he flew into Amelia Island on Thursday, inspected the car. He went to Jacksonville to a body shop supply store and bought a paint gauge, thickness gauge. And he just went around, didn't want to attract a lot of attention, just checked the paint thickness on the car. Wow, look at that, look at that. After the auction, Peter told me, I was prepared to spend $1.3 million on a car. I got it for $950,000 plus commission. He said, that might be the last 427 Cobra with original paint that's never been touched up in the world. So Peter just sold that car, I think, at a Mecum auction in Ohio just recently for $2 million. So he made a handy $1 million profit for doing a cleanup on it. So, I mean, that's an amazing find. In a lifetime, you'd be lucky to stumble across something like that. And I just got to live it remotely. I didn't have any financial issue. I just got to help people live their lives. And so the house got demolished ultimately. We moved everything to a storage building. Those 2 cars sold. These 2 cars are still in that same condition, but in another storage facility, the Morgan and the Triumph. What I didn't tell anybody, I knew about it, that guy had 1 more Cobra, and I didn't tell anybody about it. And this is a 289 Cobra that was recently the subject of a Barn Find Hunter episode. That his name was Alan Shelton. I said, Alan, you need to sell me that car. I said, you know, I'm not ready to sell, but you know, you're the right guy for it. And anyway, he never showed me the car. I lost the key to the storage locker, you know, all this stuff, right? Well, then he died. Well, his nephew called me up, and who I had met at earlier, he went down to Amelia Island with us for the sale, and he said, Tom, this is Anthony Wilson. You know, Alan died, my uncle died. He always wanted you to have this car, so I'm going to have it appraised, but if you want to make me an offer on it, and I bought that car. So I have that car now. It's the 429th 289 Cobra. Alan bought it in 1979 or 80. So I know who the 4th owner was, because that was Alan. The 3rd owner lives in Minneapolis, still alive. I talked to him. He gave me pictures. It had been raced a little bit at Elkhart Lake. I talked to the 2nd owner, who in Minneapolis bought the LA Times. Dad, I want a Cobra. And he said, I was a spoiled kid, only child. My father said, okay, find a Cobra, you can buy it. So he got the LA Times, flew to California, and bought this car, which was originally British Racing Green, from a, quote, California hippie surfer dude who drove the car barefoot. So whoever it was picked him up at LAX airport with no shoes on. Now I can tell you, I've driven a Cobra a lot. I've driven 100,000 miles in various Cobras. Even with shoes on, your feet are boiling, right? Well, this guy drove barefoot. I don't know how he did it. For a while, we thought it was Dennis Wilson, drummer of the Beach Boys. We thought it was his Cobra, but he had another Cobra. So I love this investigating stuff. And if you were here for my first seminar on this car, the research is as much fun as owning the car. So what we did was we found the ad in the LA Times from 1979 that the second owner bought the, I'm sorry, 1969. There was a second owner bought the car in 1969. We went back and at that time, the classified ads required a license plate number. And we knew the license plate number because the second owner gave us a picture of the car when he drove it back to Minneapolis, and we were able to blow it up and get the license plate number. So we went back and looked at every Sunday edition of the LA Times until we found, oh, that's the license plate number, and it gave us a phone number, and then we were able to go through the Library of Congress and reverse engineer to go from a phone number to a name and address. If your phone book at home in the old days, you'd look up a name and get a phone number. There's reverse directories too. So much fun. So it wasn't Dennis Wilson, I'm sorry to say, but so I had this car. It's missing a few pieces, but you know that's the car the way it was exactly in the storage locker. And 2 miles away was another storage locker with all the rest of the parts, the seats, you know, virtually everything else. We're missing a few items. Sometime in the 60s, aluminum work was done, and the grill is not symmetrical. It's rounder on one side, pointier on the other, so it would never be able to accept a Cobra grill, that egg crate grill. Plus, the passenger side, slab side fender was worked on, and it's just not right. So I sent it out to California, and it's got a new nose from the center of the wheel out. A new nose was made. There's a guy out there named Drew Serb who owns the Cobra Experience, and he made a new nose for it. He's got the factory bucks and all this stuff. So, you know, in 2 years, I'll show you that car, and it'll be beautiful. You know, that's going to be my project for the next 2 years, is working on this car. I bought it with a friend, Jim Maxwell. He's also a Cobra guy. So I was wearing this hat. If you saw me at dinner, I had a blue hat that said Barn Find Hunter. But between dinner and here, I ran back and got this hat. So I live in Maine in the summer, a little town called Boothbay Harbor, Maine. So I escaped the heat of Charlotte for 5 months and go to Boothbay. And so I'm waiting online at my favorite coffee bakery shop called Farm 23 in Boothbay Harbor. And I'm waiting online with this hat on. And a guy behind me says, "You race at Lime Rock?" "Well, yes, I do." He said, "Well, I used to race at Lime Rock." And so, "Oh, yeah, come on, let's sit over the table, we'll talk." You know, car guys are all friends. We just haven't all met yet. I mean, I sincerely believe that. And so we're sitting down at the table, and he's telling me about his race cars. He raced a little bit in England, Formula cars, whatever. And just as we're getting done with our conversation, he had to go to work. He was a fine woodworker. He said, "You know, I did some fine woodwork for a guy. He made windowsills and banisters of a guy out on River Road who's got a Ford GT40. Boing, what? Radar. And so right after coffee, I rode out there. He told me it was right across from Scully's Oysters. And so Scully's Oysters is a long driveway, and you couldn't see the house. Went into the woods. Well, I was driving my new F-150, and an F-150, again, you're a poser. You can't knock on somebody's door. I'm an old car guy. So I went back home, and luckily, I had this car up in Maine. Every year, I'd bring a different car to Maine, and I brought my Cunningham. I said, "This guy, if he's a real car guy, he'll appreciate this." So I drive up the driveway. I knock on the door of this nice house on a big piece of property, an old farmhouse, and a lady comes to the door. "What kind of car is that?" I said, "It's a Cunningham." "Cunningham? I've never heard of a Cunningham, but I bet my husband has." I said, "Well, bring him on out." He's in a wheelchair. We can't bring him out." "Oh, okay, well, but come on in. I'm sure he wants to meet you." Well, it turns out only a couple of people knew this guy. He had lived in Maine full-time for 20 years, but very quiet guy. But and he didn't know much about Cunningham. He heard about Briggs Cunningham, but he was a Long Islander. He lived in a place called Locust Valley, Long Island, and he was a friend of people, sports car people, and he was a sports car person. And he did have a GT40. Now, that's not the shop it was at, because the shop it was at, this shop is clean. He kept this GT40 at another guy's shop. But he bought that in 1973 for $22,000 from a guy named Herb Wetson. Now, any New Yorkers here, Wetson's restaurants, remember they were bigger than McDonald's before McDonald's became big. Well, Herb Wetson, at 21 years old, was a zillionaire. And he was buying cars and whatever. And he owned 3 of these, and he sold one to this guy, Tom Powers. If you look at the inspection stickers from New York, the last time this was driven was 1981. It's a 289 Ford GT street car, 289 engine, Weber carburetors, just wire wheels, flat tire, and wow, he really did own a GT40. Well, he owned a lot of cars. The car I showed you back here. This is a 1986 Porsche 930 Turbo, known as the Widowmaker, and he bought that new in '86. It had 16,000 miles on it. But again, mouse-ridden, just the windows were down like that for 30 years. And what a shame, but only had 16,000 miles. Go there. Oh. So anyway, this was part of a collection of cars that I got to become friends with Tom. He said, if you want to go back in the barn, I'd let you go back there. I'll trust you. And it was like, he was a hoarder in the barn, and his wife was a hoarder in the house. So really sad. He passed away this past September, but I got to be friends with him over a few years. And his wife, Sally, and he was in hospice, and I said, Sally, what are you going to do when Tom passes? She says, I never felt like a Mainer. I was never really accepted here. I never felt home here. I think I want to move to Santa Barbara. I've been there once, and I like it there. So I think I'd like to move there. It's warm. She said, but first I got to take care of myself, because I've been taking care of Tom. Now, Tom had cancer, strokes, and heart attack. I mean, wow. I've been taking care of him for 6 years and ignoring myself. I'm going to go to the doctor. 4 weeks later, she was dead. She had pancreatic cancer. So, I didn't know she died. And then this niece called me, Tom Powers' niece. And she said, you know what, my uncle thought the world of you, and my aunt said that I could trust you with anything. Would you help me figure out what to do with all these cars and things? So I'm helping her clean the barn, literally right now. Right now. I'll be back there Monday helping her. But we're on our 8th dumpster. There was never a piece of wood or a pipe or anything that he ever had that he ever threw out. If he did a brake job on his Pontiac, he kept the old brake shoes, the old rotors, the calipers, and it's just stacked up. Anyway, she said, look, my uncle would love for you to have these cars. Make me a fair offer. And so I made her an offer. I bought them all, except the GT40. That day I was $3.5 million short. Damn. But so I bought this 930 Turbo. Holy crap. Actually, my son and I bought it together. We bought all these cars together. So included in this deal, I didn't get the Ford GT, an MGTC that his father bought new in 1948. Whoa. A Lotus Elan, all souped up, with 165 horsepower, which for an Elan is amazing. A 1946 Indian Chief motorcycle, a GMC Cyclone pickup truck with 15,000 miles on it that he bought new, a 66 Corvette with huge flares and huge tires. I told a friend of mine, I said, if you had a Farrah Fawcett poster on your bedroom wall, you'll love this car. It was that kind of car. And what else? There's 1 or 2 cars I'm missing, I know. But anyway, I'm helping them clean this garage out right now, and I feel like I have to be respectful. This is his whole man's life are going into a dumpster. And so before I throw anything out, could this have any value to anybody? Because he hung on to it for 40 years. I don't want to just toss it without thinking about it, because this guy thought it was important enough to keep. There's GT40. So, that's kind of my life for the last 10 years. I wrote all these barn find books. And in fact, I'm writing a new book now about that Cobra. I'm calling it The Last Barn Find Cobra, the one I just found in Charlotte. But I drive around in this Woody, which is a barn find. I bought it when I was 15 years old from next to a barn. It wasn't in the barn, it was next to the barn in Brentwood on Long Island. I was 15 years old. I went to a Catholic high school, and a friend of mine who lived, I went over his house after school, and we're walking. You know, when you go to a Catholic high school, you gotta wear a jacket and a tie, and we're walking back to his house through a schoolyard. I said, "Oh, Woody, holy crap." So we run over, and there's a fence. We ran there on the fence. I said, I went home that night, "Dad, I found a Woody, it's $300. He said, "Well, I'd love for you to have it, but we don't have $300 for you." So a lady I did yard work for, and I washed the cars and mowed the grass and whatever, she loaned me $300. I bought that in 1969. I still have it. It's like my lifetime friend. That's it. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I mean, all I want to do is talk about cars. So,
Okay, so if you'll wait, we have 2 microphones going around here. We are recording, so if you could wait for us to get the microphone to you.
Tom, again, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
What about the Datsun Roadster? Being a Datsun guy,
bada bing.
very interested in that.
Yeah.
Please.
I was telling somebody at the dinner just now. Linda Sharp was most recently a writer for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. She wrote automotive stories and racing stories. And because I was involved with Mercedes-Benz's press cars, I did a lot of interaction with Linda, and we became friends. She said, "Tom, I live not far from Road Atlanta. Why don't you just come over to my house and buy my Datsun Roadster? I'm not going to race it anymore. It's in the basement. I'll let you have it at a real good price." And okay, you know, all right, I'll get there, Linda, but I've got a big business. I got lots of employees. I got, you know, like, seriously, there's just a lot going on. I didn't have time for it, and then I forgot about it. So then Linda got married to Darrell Waltrip's engine builder, and they bought some property on the North Carolina-Virginia line, exit 100. So she said, I saw her at a Mercedes-Benz event. She said, "Tom, when you pass exit 100 on I-77, you're 5 miles from my house. Come and just buy that Datsun Roadster." She had raced this Datsun Roadster. I found it in 81 races. Jim Fitzgerald, a boyfriend, drove it in many races. SCCA runoff, nationals and stuff, all sorts. Oh, I'll get there eventually. I never got there. And last Christmas, not this past Christmas, the Christmas before, I'm driving up to New York to visit relatives at Christmas, and I told my wife, you know, exit 100, there's a Datsun race car 5 miles from here. I've never seen it, but she told me. "Who told you?" I said, "Linda Sharp." So I'm driving, and Linda Sharp, okay. She died in 2017. I said, "Yeah." But when she died, I mailed $500 in her name to an animal rescue league. And so she started telling me all about the Datsun, about Linda. She's Googling all this stuff. I said, "You know, when we get back from vacation, I'm going to go knock on the door." So we get back. I found out where she lived, 5 miles from the exit, and I knock on the door. She died in 2017. She went into the hospital for easy surgery to take care of her esophagus. She had GERD. She died of cardiac arrest on it. And so her husband's waiting to take her home. I don't know how to tell you this, but your wife's passed away. Wow. So I knock on the door. "Hi, Bob, I'm Tom Cotter." "Tom Cotter, I never did thank you for sending money to the Animal Rescue League, but thank you so much." And we stood there talking, because I had spent so much time in NASCAR, as did he, and we kind of knew each other a little bit. I said, "Bob, whatever happened to Linda's race car?" "Right over in that garage there." "You know, Linda always," "Yeah, I know. She told me she wanted you to buy it. Let's go take a look at it." So I look at the car, and it was fine. It was shiny. It was like a nice race car. And she hadn't driven it since 1981 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, the engine seized. That was it. I said, "Bob, I'd like to buy that car." And he gave me a price. I said, "It's sold." He said, "Oh, I didn't ask enough money, I guess, because you said." I said, "No, it's a fine amount of money, but no matter what you said, because it's Linda's, I'd buy it." And so now I'm having Mike Unger build the engine. He's in Virginia Beach. And I hope to race at Road Atlanta this November at the Vintage Race. Her home track. I'm not touching the graphics. And I'm going to bring all the paraphernalia that she gave me. her helmet, her driver's suit, her jackets, log books. I kind of bought into the family. It was amazing. It was wonderful. So cars, have a way of like adopting people, or at least me. All right, who's next?
I don't think you divulged the name of the person that owned that Cobra from your reverse lookup.
The first owner, the last owner?
The first owner.
I don't know the first owner's name.
Oh,
I have it in the book.
It wasn't someone famous.
Nah, well, it wasn't Dennis Wilson or anybody like him. But this is really cool because for 2 months we chased that because I know a writer in California who had just done a story with Carol Wilson, Dennis Wilson's first wife. And at their divorce, he gave her the Ferrari Lusso because he bought a 275 Ferrari. And he did a story about Carol and her Ferrari, which she still owns apparently. And it was on my Facebook. It was on Barn Find Hunter. And I said, the guy was a surfer dude who drove barefoot and long hair. She said, that had to have been Dennis. That was my husband. Anyway, it wasn't her husband, but I got to talk to Dean Torrance of Jan and Dean. Like, how does this happen, right? And so I got to talk to, Jan and Dean about, Dennis and I used to race his Cobra against my Stingray on Mulholland Drive after gigs or after we left the bar or whatever. He said, but I don't remember the color. Well, Dennis owned a bright yellow Cobra, and ours was never any color besides British Racing Green, so that kind of killed it. But, my brief moments associating with stardom. Yes? Oh.
Just curious as to how your wife fits into all this. Does she go places with you? And
Yeah, I got a pretty cool wife. I mean, she used to be much more into this, but when my son was born 34 years ago, she felt, okay, now I can step away because you have a new buddy. But, we go on Cobra tours. I organize a Cobra tour every year for real Cobras. It has to be a real 289 or a real 427. So the deal is you have to have a real Carroll Shelby Cobra, and you can't be an asshole. So most people make one but you have to make both. And they're very low key. We don't have no sport jackets. Everybody's wearing blue jeans and t-shirts, and we drive about 1,000 miles in 4 days. We've done these tours a lot in this area, Georgia, Alabama. We just did one in West Virginia, North Carolina, but we've done New England tours. We've done Wyoming. We've done Montana. Every year a different location. So I think next year we're going to do South Dakota. And so, that's one of the highlights of our lives because we met these people. This will be our 20th year doing Cobra tours. So 19 years ago we met these people. Okay, they're just Cobra. And now they're like our best friends in the world. So she is really cool about this stuff. Yeah, I'm very lucky.
Tom,
It's working.
tell me more about your misspent youth on Long Island. Now, if you found this Woody, you no doubt hung out at West Hampton Drag Strip occasionally and raced on Sunshine Parkway.
I never raced.
And,
No?
no?
I never raced, man. I didn't have any money, I hardly have money to go to admission, but I snuck in when I could.
The Long Island Auto Museum, was it still open?
Henry Austin Clark,
Yeah.
it was still open.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What a great place
Islip
that was.
Speedway, remember demolition derbies on Wide World of Sports? I was at Islip Speedway as a Cub Scout. I started racing. I got my racing license, road racing license, at Bridgehampton Race Circuit in 1979. So I'm coming up on, 45, 46 years of having a racing license. I want to race until, I wanted to race till I'm 70, but now I'm 71. I want to race till maybe I'm 80. We'll see. I'm a Ford guy, so I race a Corvette, of course. So I race a 64 Stingray, fuel-injected 327, and it's a blast. Vintage racing is so good because vintage racing is it's all about the people first, and the car second, and the racing is third. There's no trophies, there's no award money, there's nothing. It's just people respecting cars and respecting each other. So it's really cool. But, to make a living in the automotive racing business, you can't be on Long Island. So I had to leave Long Island and move to Charlotte to get involved in racing. And for 25 years, I made my living in NASCAR, IndyCar, Formula One, IMSA, and drag racing.
Quick question. What's happened with Pete Egan? We were all road and track junkies for years, and when the magazine switched, we kind of fell off the radar, but I have no idea what happened to Pete. We used to read a lot about him and don't know.
He's still a good friend, and he just decided he's as nice a person as you hope he'd be. You know, sometimes you meet heroes, and they turn out to be not so good. I've spent so much time with Peter. I mean, just 9 days in a Cobra. You know, you're sitting this far from somebody else. You know, you get to know somebody. But I've known Peter for 35 years. I was a road and track reader, but I made my living in NASCAR. So I invited Peter to do a story on the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte Motor Speedway when I was a PR director there. And, you know, it was wonderful. And that got Peter and I to be friends starting in about 1986, 87. He's a wonderful guy. He's a Wisconsin person. He's just like you would imagine somebody from Wisconsin. Aw, shucks. He really does play blues guitar. You know, he works on his own Jaguar, restored. When he's done with the restoration, it's perfect. Now he can enjoy it. He sells it because he wants another. It's all about the destination, not the. I mean, it's about the journey, not the destination. He doesn't want a restored car. He just wants to always work on a car. He's a great guy, but you know, he had a stroke. He was kickstarting a BSA motorcycle with a lot of torque, and in the middle of a kick, he had a stroke. Like, what the heck happened? So he still rides motorcycles, but he got rid of his kickstarts. Now he has electric starts. He has one of the Jaguar convertibles when Ford owned them. You know, it's reliable, good car. I don't think he's got a small sports car anymore, but he's as nice as you would imagine to be. And I've just invited him to visit me in Maine this summer, so we'll see if he comes.
All right, Tom, I got another question for you.
Make it a hard one, would you?
It is so admirable that you still have the first car that you ever purchased.
Yeah.
So first of all, I'd like a show of hands in the audience. How many people in the audience still have the first car they ever purchased?
Wow. Well, it was my second.
Okay.
It was my second
All
car.
right.
It was my second car.
The second one. Okay. The follow-up question is have you counted or put on a spreadsheet how many cars have passed through your hands over the years?
You know, I started that maybe 25 years ago. I just never got hundreds. Right now, I probably have 25 because, you know, I just bought 6 more from Maine. My son's worse than I am. I mean, he's 34 years old. He's a chip off the old block. When he was like 4 years old, we had a Porsche 356, like the red one you have out in the lobby here, beautiful one. And he was just a little kid in his little car seat, and we're cruising around on a Sunday. And we went to a very country gas station in North Carolina. I went inside to get Coca-Cola or something. And I came out, and it was an old, like a 51 Chevy pickup truck in the back of that place, like, you know, in the weeds, and it was up on blocks, and it was rusty, and it was horrible. And I get back in the car, and I said, Dad, we should buy that truck and fix it up. And he was 4 years old. It's like, wow. So, you know, now he's racing right now. It started at 6 o'clock this evening at Sebring in a 14-hour race that ends at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. He's the AMG product manager for the United States for Mercedes-Benz. Like, he's got 12 cars. He owns, you know, remember the Pantera that was on one of my episodes? That's his car. He's got 2 Porsches. I mean, he's a cool dude. He's my best friend. So.
All right, we got one.
But my first car was a 1940 Ford convertible. Why would that be? Well, I used to watch Leave It to Beaver, and Lumpy Rutherford drove a 1940 Ford convertible, and I fell in love with that car on TV. So when I was riding a bicycle in Rocky Point, New York, behind Charlie's welding shop was a 1940 Ford convertible for $25, and I bought it. And that was my first car. And I never did much with it. You know, the problem I had a desire, but I had no money, no tools, no garage, and no talent. So, yeah, the Woody was the second car.
All right, last question, right
No,
here
I
in the
wanna
front
keep going.
row.
So, of all these people that you've had contact with and you've gotten to know the people as well as the cars, it always amazes me, beyond the true hoarders, that is a disease, really.
It is, yeah.
What's the mindset, or how have you found people's thinking on why they would take a fine car and then just let it toast in the sun or be,
Yeah.
you know, debris laden in a partial barn.
That bothers me. You know, I meet people and I have to be respectful of them, but I want to shake them and say, you know, you had a car when you were in high school that was like amazing car, but now 40 years later it's rusting in your driveway. What are you thinking? I can't say that though. You know, in my mind that's what's going on. But in the book that some of you bought that I signed earlier, Secrets of the Barn Find Hunter, I actually talked to a psychologist about hoarding and like what is it about hoarding and why is it part of some people's lives and they can't let go of it and whatever. And it was really interesting. She said that hoarders want to, well, first of all, they want to be interesting. And even if nobody else knows about it, they know they have every Lionel train starting with or every baseball card or every magazine, whatever they decide to hoard, they're interesting to them. They have a completeness. It solves something in their life. They feel inadequate in some other areas, and here's a place that they own and control, and it's all theirs. I met a hoarder when I went to Montana. You know, like I thought it was just the cars in his house that were interesting. He said, no, come to my warehouse. And he collected Buick Rivieras in a warehouse. Riviera. Every model, every generation. I bought this when I was in high school, and now, you know, now he's 70 years old. Riviera, cluttered with stuff. And he said, oh, I do have a Corvette. You have a Corvette? Where? He said, well, it's over there. Well, there's so many cars packed so tight. How do I get over there? And my camera guys could never get over there, right? How do I get over there? Well, he said, you got to slide through the Riviera. I said, what do you mean? So there's no steering wheel and no steering column. You slide through the front seat, open the other door, and then I can see the Corvette that's around the corner. So I do that, and I step out the other side, and there's a mattress and pillows and stuff. Oh, well, what am I stepping on? Oh, that's where I sleep. So he said, you know, but I really realized I have a problem, and I'm getting older, and I need to get out of it. I have to start. Well, I have to tell you, he didn't have enough years left in his life to, if he sold a car a week, I don't know, it would take him 10 years. They made so many cars. And he said, so I need to get out of this thing. I need to get rid of the cars I've got. I need to make my life easier. An hour later, we're saying, okay, well, I'll take it easy. It's nice meeting you. Thanks for letting us film here. He said, by the way, if you see any good cars on your travels, so, you know, I get that book and you can read about, or you could probably Google hoarding and learn about it that way. But it is something that can be treated.
I had
Are you a hoarder?
that I was caretaker for that was a true hoarder.
Oh, boy.
Into all sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And he had to drive his father's 1982 Buick LeSabre until it was falling apart, and there was only room for him in it.
Yeah, McDonald's bags and all that stuff.
All the Walmart and McDonald's bags and all that stuff had to stay in the car, along with unopened mail and.
Oh yeah, now I know it. I meet those
found
people.
checks in there and everything else when I.
Yeah.
But I understand those folks, but some people that are of sound thinking, it just doesn't make sense to me.
You know, all of us in this room are pretty stable, but we're that far from being insane. It was so nice to see you. If you want to meet me, here I am. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. See you at the next program.
If you want to look at the Cunningham engine,